Hello. Today we're going to be talking about AI plus code quality. I gave a talk a few weeks ago about how quality is going to kind of change as we move into this kind of AI era. If you're like a quality professional or you're a leader that needs to think about quality, this is really a talk kind of more aimed to you. For everybody else, I think there's going to be some interesting things here related to how the world's changing and how it really is going to impact how to think about software quality. So I think there's something maybe here for everybody, but I think it'll definitely be more impactful if you relate somewhat to testing in your kind of day to day. So just as a quick starter, coding practices are dramatically evolving. And there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of think about this, but effectively there's now new tools that most teams are leveraging to help them create more code faster. So you've got, of course, like your AI code assistants. You have AI autocomplete that's kind of auto-completing like things as we go through. You have these like AI agents that are doing kind of coding on your behalf. You can give it a task and it goes off and makes changes to your code base. And then, of course, now we've most recently got this kind of concept of vibe coding and this idea of I'm going to just kind of tell it what I want, and I'm just going to act as a tester to kind of evaluate that solution as it goes. Flypeter.com is probably the most well-known example of this, in which case you have this kind of flight simulator game, effectively, that you can play. So you've got a little plane here that's flying. So the author originally has never actually coded a game before, has limited kind of knowledge of what are the skills that are required for creating a game. And so he's been able to piece this together just using kind of AI to code it for him with that limited knowledge. And so it's really impressive what he's been able to do. However, he is also still a, web developer. So he already kind of does have some of that knowledge involved here, right? So suffice it to say, these coding tools and practices are now creating a lot more code that exists in the world. Additionally, there's new patterns to speed up development. A lot of companies that are providing migration documents or implementation documents are now including prompts that you can provide to your LLMs to help them basically set up the environment or configure different environments. I was using trigger.dev. V2 had completely expired and we had lacked on our migration. I had to migrate everything in a couple hours and I was able to do it. And to a large degree, this migration script helped me do it. And so not only are developers coding more, but they're also leveraging these sort of migration prompts to make large scale code changes because it's easy, because it's from the authors of that code solution. So it's easier for it to be implemented. But, the thing is I'm responsible for testing it. I'm responsible for making sure it works. And the larger the scale of that change is, the more chances there are for something to go wrong. Additionally, high fidelity demos just got cheaper, right? I redid our hint website. I redid the stable discussion website recently as well. These sites were done in hours, not weeks or months. In my long history of web consulting, these sites have historically taken a very long time to get right, even to this level of fidelity. And so we've really never seen this kind of speed of production. And now I think it's also easier for us to get to a point where people accept that these sites look professional, they look well done. And so it's easier to be perceived as having quality. And so that testing that needs to be done is more difficult to see now because it just seems like the quality is already baked in. But there's some sneaky things, when we did our hit services site, initially the contact form wasn't working. And so I had to do a couple rounds of testing on that just to make sure that that form worked correctly. So that's something that you don't get out of the box for free. But overall this, this is the main point. Development is accelerating. And so we need to do, code checks to make sure that these problems were solved with rigor. These new patterns could miss key checks that need to be made, and you would have caught them if you developed it manually. If I was migrating this one at a time in a very much more formalized pattern, I would probably catch things that I'm going to miss going down this path. And then you may also need to shift our focus, right, from unit testing and just thinking about specific units that are now very likely to change quickly as we change our code, to now thinking more about integration, visual integration, and thinking more about automation in that sense, because we need to be able to test that the flow works correctly every time, and maybe less about the specific units, at least as a first pass, and then maybe we come back to the units. So this is a big focus here. And I think we can start thinking about leveraging agents to keep pace. So if we're thinking about, okay, how do I make sure that my software still has quality? maybe this is a place where we now can like leverage agents. MCPs are like this really amazing new protocol that enables these agentic assistants to work on our teams. The capability for you to like bundle a existing tool or existing functionality alongside an AI is a really like powerful capability. And I've already seen some like really incredible stuff that we've been able to do with it. Let's do a quick demo of like how Playwright works, because I think this is like a really amazing like feature. All right, so in here, effectively, I've got my Claude interface and I've got a few MCPs set up here. So I've actually got a Playwright MCP server running as well as a Figma server. So we're actually going to go into my projects here. And I've actually already built out this accessibility assistant, not that one, the V3 version, of course. And that accessibility assistant has a bunch of details related to accessibility and like what to look for. So I'm going to say, hey, let's go take a look at the website and see if there are major accessibility issues with the site, specifically on its contact form. So let's take a look at what it does here. So it's going to go off, start thinking about this job that it needs to do, and it is going to start running Playwright. And so it's going to start navigating to Playwright. The browser, there's a browser tab kind of opening up in the background. You can't see it, but it's going to do a quick screenshot of the homepage just to kind of get a feel for that. And then it is going to try and click on the contact form. And I'm actually seeing that is popping up. And now it's going to get the visible HTML for the page. So now it's going to do that. And so you can see here, it pulled down all the HTML for the page. And now it's going to specifically examine the contact form by clicking the contact button. So it's looking at the data contact trigger here specifically. And all of these commands are being kind of generated real time based on the site. So just because it was able to, it navigated, it took a screenshot. It was like, okay, I kind of know some things exist here, and it knows to now click on some place where it says contact. Sometimes these things get in kind of a loop of like what they're trying to do. So that may be what's happening here. It was already able to kind of get a feel for the page just by pulling down the HTML that's available. And it does know about this trigger. It's just timing out, trying to get those things, trying to contact these things. Based on the analysis, overall accessibility, the site correctly uses language detection. It has this general good semantic structure. It's got a good color theme. It has sufficient contrast. That's good. It has appropriate alt text. It does seem to implement responsive design. And then required field indicators. So it can see that it uses this, but there's no area required. Okay, so that's good. That's a good point. Again, error handling. I don't think it really tried to get to the point where there is error handling, but I also don't see that necessarily being used either. So that's another good point. Focus isn't properly moved to the modal when the modal pops up. That's a good one. There's no apparent focus trap within the modal dialog. Another good one. So you can see it really found a lot of kind of good details just by kind of looking at the HTML on the page and kind of seeing how that works, right? And now it's going even further to like suggest a few things that could be improved. So now if I wanted to say, hey, write me a report that I could give to the team responsible for this website. Now it can go off and actually think about all the things that it found, all the suggestions that it gave, and now it's going to evaluate like, how well this worked. But overall, really impressive, really cool. It really shows the capability of like what MCPs can do. It's kind of crazy that we're able to like really just leverage these things, and AI is flexible enough to use whatever tool we give it. We've seen what Playwright can do. It's able to really evaluate a page and go through this kind of testing process that would have taken a person a long time to like write a script, evaluate the site, think through the site. But now because the code can kind of just like look at the site and introspect, we're just able to do that for free now. Additionally, like we're building these AI, products. So like we're not just using AI in our coding practices, we're also building products that incorporate AI. And the problem with that is that like AI code is non-deterministic. It does not work a consistent way. It's not reliable in a sense. And so that unpredictability can cause it to break in unique ways. This is a challenge for how we, think about our models for testing software. So like when I needed to think about resilience and having that system work consistently every single time, I needed to build out custom evaluations for the AI. So I needed to run these same tests multiple times in order to evaluate which models worked and which models didn't. Additionally, I could kind of take one set of prompts, run it across a bunch of different models and see what the results were, and then take a different prompt, run it against those same models, and see how much better the results are overall. And so you can kind of see here between these two, you've seen a marked improvement on run 2 versus this run up here. As we improve things, we can kind of see a demonstrable improvement across the board. And so that's something that you now need to start thinking about when you're building AI products. So you need to be able to evaluate how much better is this getting every single time. And your evaluations now need to be based on like, what is the AI trying to do? And additionally, like AI is very inaccurate in and of itself, right? It's scoring B's and C's on some of the major tests. Now, these tests change all the time, and we'll have a leaderboard. All the models will like lean toward that leaderboard. They'll all get better at that leaderboard. Another leaderboard will come out and all the models are awful at that one. So this is constantly a shifting space, and most models don't have very good reasoning in general. This is a constant challenge. Like these models do consistently score poor on these tests. And so when we think about like, how do we improve our AI code that we're producing, grounding becomes really important. I've got a whole video on that. You can see that link above. But effectively, we have this kind of question that we've asked the LLM, and it's going to get that 90% right? Like we're optimistic. It's B and C, but let's say it's 90%. And then it's going to take that solution that it said, and then it's going to try and iterate on that and use that answer again for something else, right? When we ask an AI to build on top of another AI's answer, that becomes a less accurate result than the previous one, where we're just relying on one AI. So you get this compounding failure. And so the final result ends up being very, very poor over time, right? Because we're kind of chaining together these AI calls that could be inaccurate at any step. So grounding helps us be able to detect when something becomes inaccurate and helps us to retry that challenging inaccuracy, right? And so that actually does lead us to greater than 90% accuracy if our grounding model is actually very good. We'll improve the rate that this LLM creates the right answer because we've been able to detect times where that answer was incorrect. Overall, grounding helps us create a more robust and better answer. And like additionally, like we're building these AI tools into our products, but those products are actually going to rely on our existing environments. And so if I'm on the quality team or I'm thinking about quality of our products, how do I help that consistency and help that reliability? Well, one, this grounding method is probably going to rely on the environment that you have, the other services, the other data that you have available to you. That is the source of truth. And so you need to make sure that these systems are very secure and reliable in the way that you already have been, but those are going to feed back into the kind of new agentic systems that we're leveraging, right? And so these systems are now going to really rely on that environment that you've already set up. Quality has a critical role in AI, right? Teams need help, like, to think about inaccuracies. They need help defining systems that can help them ground their AI solutions in something closer to the business realities that exist. And our existing like internal services that we already have, those are going to be critical for building good AI tooling, right? And so when we think about engineering AI solutions, quality has this critical role. But the really big challenge is that when we thought about quality in the past, and especially at enterprise scale, when you think about quality, you're often limited to how much you know about the production environment. But that production environment has so many critical factors when you start working with AIs. The questions users are asking, the context in which they're asking those questions, like what kind of details are also being given with that question. Is that user on their phone or on their desktop, or do they have a different client that they're using? What time is it? Are they in a different region that we might not expect? Or are they using a language that we didn't expect them to be using? And additionally, like we have a lot of environment variables, like how available is that environment? Does that environment have better latency or worse latency than other systems? Does that user have access or security clearance to access things that we thought they might have had or that they always did have in a staging environment? Are there resource limits that exist to protect production environments that we didn't have in staging environments? Is there issues with data freshness where like where staging never had issues with the freshness, but now because we're in a production environment, we need to be thinking about how fresh the data is. And is it formatted differently? Maybe there's a staging environment and production environment have different ways of formatting data. And so all of these become really critical factors in us building a really good AI solution because LLMs are so context sensitive that it's really important that we understand all the factors at play when we're testing these solutions to make sure that they're good. And so this observability becomes critical. And I'm not sponsored by Brain Trust, but I showed you the diagram that I had created earlier. Brain Trust is the only tool that I've really seen that gets close to building that same kind of functionality. We're still early days. Like, there's no best practices about like how to do this or like what the practices are for your team. And the way different people implement AI and what they implement it for is going to be so varied that there's not going to be a consistent toolbox. But I do believe that like tracing how your solution works and being able to evaluate and test it, I think those are two very critical pieces that you just need to invest in. And so as we start thinking about like testing AI systems, there's a few things to keep in mind. Like, you could use exact text to like check, hey, I give it an answer and did it get the right answer back? You could do similarity scores, kind of like a RAG system or embeddings, and check the embeddings if they're similar. Again, like, similarity can get you so far, but oftentimes you'll have an LLM checking another LLM, and that actually can kind of work pretty well to be able to validate, hey, is this what we expected? And using those sorts of validators, using these sort of systems, you can then develop a hill climb, which is like, how much better is the previous solution than the last solution? And lastly, you want to do a lot of manual checking and reference so that you can like leverage that manual checking in your validators or your automations, because that'll help you define your test criteria. It'll help you do fine tuning potentially if you need to do that for a very specific use case. Again, this is like kind of the space that you need to start thinking about if you really want to start testing AI systems. If you're a leader who has concerns about AI or wants to like better understand AI, you need to be able to educate and bring awareness to your team about like what AI is, what are the concerns around it. You need to be able to understand the tooling and support required for that tooling. You need to be able to think about like potentially any domain specific tooling that you might need for development. You need to consistently like generate that culture of quality. That's really important. You also need to, of course, like learn from production as well, right? If you're, of course, interested in like having some help to help develop out your leadership practices around AI, my company Hint Services provides a lot of like mentorship, guidance, workshops for teams in helping them understand what AI is and how it works. We can do virtual webinars just like what we're doing here, but I've also done hands-on workshops where I've kind of taught how to start getting started with AI, how to start thinking about it, and get teams more familiar and comfortable with it, as well as get leaders kind of thinking in the right headspace for how to leverage it or how to start thinking about why it impacts them in their roles. Additionally, recently we launched a AI skills for designers workshop, and that has been a really great experience. So if you're a designer thinking about AI, also happy to reach out and talk to you there. And of course, as I mentioned it before, we do have a new site for Stable Discussion. I'd love to encourage you to go check it out. It has links to all the different things that we have available for us here, as well as links to the latest videos and the latest articles that we've released. It also has a link to our paid Discord community, which we're launching. So if you're interested in discussing AI or thinking about it, you can go check us out there as well. If you subscribe to our Substack, you can also get access to the paid community that way. So a couple different options for you. But thanks so much. Really appreciate it if you subscribe and like, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.